My name is Michael Goodrich, and I will be going over case 7-2, Solutions Network Inc., a GVV case. So first of all, an overview of this case involves Sarah Young, the controller at Solutions Network Inc., and Paul Henley, the CFO at the same firm. Basically, at the end of 2018, there was a transaction that wouldn't have all of its shipping and such finalized until the beginning of 2019. By potentially postponing that, which is what Sarah wants to do, postpone the revenue from that until 2019, they would lose out on $1 million of revenue for 2018, which would make them miss their target goals and such for that year, and miss a threshold for bonuses for the higher ranking officials in that firm. Paul Henley would like to recognize it in 2018 so they meet those goals and hit that threshold, but Sarah wants to postpone it as it would be more in compliance with regulations and be the more ethically correct thing to do. So now I'll go over some questions related to this. Question number 1 is, what are the main arguments Sarah is trying to counter? That is, what are the reasons and rationalizations she needs to address in deciding how to handle the meeting with Paul Henley? So Paul and Sarah, they discussed this on a Friday. They couldn't come to a reasonable conclusion, so they decided to come back on Monday after the weekend and discuss again. So the main arguments that she needs to counter really are that of the target goals, the increased net income and increased revenue, and those potential bonuses, because that's really the only thing that Paul's writing on to try to back up his argument here and what needs to be handled in this case. Question number 2 is, what is at stake for the key parties in this case, and what are Sarah's ethical obligations to them? So certainly on Paul's side, what's at stake is those bonuses, that revenue, those targets, but on Sarah's side, there is the issue of their ethics are at stake. They need to do the ethically right thing, delay that wait. They don't know what's going to happen with the transaction. Many things could happen. That's why the regulations are in place to where they need to postpone that. And sure, it's going to decrease those numbers a little bit for 2018, but ultimately will be better for the company. It's the ethically right thing to do that. And our ethical obligations are to make sure that firm is representing itself in the best way it can by following those ethical standards. Question number 3 is, should Sarah's decision on revenue recognition in 2017 influence how she handles the DSS transaction, and explain. So in 2017, there was a very similar situation. A transaction happened towards the end of 2017. They ended up actually recognizing it in that year, even though it hadn't been finalized, got finalized in 2018, but their audit had been postponed by 30 days, which meant that in that time frame, they were able to finalize that. It worked out just fine. It was okay. And they didn't actually catch any troubles from any of that, even though they probably should have done it the other way and postponed that. Therefore, I don't believe that that should influence them in any way. By letting it influence, it sets a precedent. That's what they're going to keep doing and not following the ethically right thing to do. And honestly, everything's a case-by-case situation. This one's honestly really different from that one and needs to be handled differently and with a different ethical viewpoint, per se. Question number 4 is, should Sarah follow Shannon's advice? What if she does and Paul Henley does not back off? What additional levers can she use to strengthen her position? So Sarah's friend Shannon advised her to try to stick to her ethical beliefs there and try to convince Paul that that's the right thing to do, to postpone that. If Paul doesn't back down, then the levers she'll need to get are the other people in the company and the firm that potentially could back her up. Other high-ranking officials or other people that generally can support her and understand that, yes, this is the ethically right thing to do, and here's the reasons why. Maybe even find more evidence as to why it's the right thing to do in that, and just get people on her side so they can work together to try to make sure that the right thing happens for the firm. Question number 5 is, what is the most powerful and persuasive response to the reasons and rationalizations Sarah needs to address? To whom should the arguments be made, and when, and in what context? So the most powerful persuasive response is just that this really isn't the right thing ethically or legally to do. There could be issues if this doesn't go right. It's really risky if the transaction doesn't actually work out the way they think it's going to, because it is still in process. And there are potential legal ramifications if they're not following what the regulations say to do. So ethically, it is the right thing to do to postpone that. And that needs to be told to Paul or anyone else that thinks that they need to do this and rush this transaction. And just be told to them as soon as possible in the right case, maybe in a meeting to discuss this stuff properly and professionally so that they can handle it and make the right ethical decision. The last question, number 6, is what should Sarah do next if all parties at Solutions Network Inc. support Paul and flat out tell Sarah to be a team player? So in that case, if they really aren't listening to her and they side with Paul, doesn't work out, there needs to be some whistleblowing going on. She needs to involve the SEC, show them that, hey, this firm's trying to do things that aren't up to standards and regulations. Something needs to happen here, something needs to change. And therefore, she needs to, at that point, whistleblow and involve that bigger and more powerful party to intervene and help make sure the firm's doing the best it can to follow an ethical standard. So finally, here are my sources. And thank you for your time. And that was my presentation on the case.